Grayson, since you are a recruiting coordinator, do you have to be reminded of second signing day, or did you know it was coming up?
No, I definitely remembered that it was coming up for sure. But
Okay.
but I would say, to Craig's point, I mean, it just has become so watered down. I mean, it's just nowhere near what it used to be. I mean, back in the day, that day used to be, insane. You'd have all the signing day shows. Everyone would be signing kind of in the morning, or throughout that day, you're waiting on guys to make decisions. And nowadays, that happens in December, and even then, it's not quite to the level I don't think that it used to be, which is unfortunate. But I would also say I think it's much better for the calendar and for programs to kind of get these guys locked in before this February date. It kind of makes more sense with the schedule, especially in terms of enrollment.
All right, Grayson, what's the biggest contributing factor to Baylor reestablishing the pipeline from their own city this last couple days?
I think it's just a focus on it, right? There's a lot of attention that the staff has put on it. I think the additions of the guys they brought in last offseason from a recruiting standpoint is huge. I also think, there's been guys, I think, that have come through Waco, of course, who have been really good. But I would say that a lot of those times I felt like many of those guys were kind of trending in different directions and kind of, gonna go somewhere else almost regardless. Whereas with these guys, I felt like Baylor's done a good job for years kind of building this connection with the guys in the area. And I think when you offer a kid really young and you continue to recruit them for a long time, like they did with London and Jamarian, it puts you in a really good position to end up landing those guys later on. And I think that's kind of what happened here. Of course, the connection with London, with his family, obviously helps as well. And that's a very rare circumstance, and one that, frankly, Baylor absolutely couldn't miss on when it comes to London Smith. I mean, just too many connections from a legacy standpoint.
So let's break down these two commits, Grayson, and I won't have you do both answers back to back. So let's start off with London Smith, big-time wide receiver out of University High School here in Waco, a 4-star rated player, a top 200 player, a guy who's got offers from literally – I think I'm as close to being able to say literally and be accurate about that, like literally everybody. I mean, a who's who, Bama, Oregon, everybody. Your thoughts on London Smith, why this matters, why, besides the family connection, this all came together when it did, and obviously your thoughts on him as a player.
So first of all, the reason why it matters. I mean, guys, we know how many problems Baylor has had when it comes to landing legacy guys. And they just have not been able to really capitalize on that consistently. So that's kind of that first area that you talk about with London. And then, of course, the 254 connection as well. That's another big part of this, just Baylor kind of getting back to recruiting their area of Central Texas at an elite level. Not a good level, an elite level. And I think you're really seeing that with this kind of addition with London Smith. And I would say the same thing with Jamarian. But, the Baylor legacy part of things definitely is a huge deal here. Now, as far as the player goes, this is a guy that Baylor targeted very early on and made a priority throughout his entire recruitment. I mean, you could say he's pretty much the guy at wide receiver for them, or at least he has been for the longest amount of time. And so I think that speaks to the level of trust that Dallas Baker has in him and kind of who he can be. And then, of course, this new system that Baylor has in with Jake Spavital on this offense. He fits really well. I think the biggest thing that, London brings to the table is the versatility, right? He can play inside, he can play outside. He's got the speed to play either. Very good body control, catches the ball extremely well. I also think he's a really good route runner. I think there's a lot to his game that is very intriguing, and I think we've seen that, especially over the last, 2.5 years. Of course, he missed a lot of this season with an injury, so didn't get to really see him have that full breakout junior year, but he certainly had that as a sophomore. And so I think this is a guy, again, just the production's there. The offer list is insane. I mean, like you said, when you have Alabama, Georgia, and Oregon, you pretty much have offers from everybody. And so that's kind of where that is with him. An elite prospect, a guy who's rated extremely highly and deserves to be. And then, of course, with the legacy and 254 connection, it makes this pickup far more meaningful.
So then the second domino to fall out of the Waco area was Jamarion Vincent from Connolly High School. And I know on one recruiting website, they thought he was Texas bound. And look, Connolly guys, basically there is a pipeline that's kind of developed there where those guys have been going to Texas as of late. But then I saw, I think it might have been Rivals or something. There was a prediction for Tech or whatever, but he commits to Baylor shortly after London Smith, and a guy who's as highly, if not more highly rated, with a very impressive offer list in his own right, not quite to the extent of London Smith's, but a lot of big offers for him as well. So Jamarion Vincent, why is he kind of changing the Connolly fortunes for the Bears? And same questions that obviously applied to London Smith.
So another top 150 guy, a four-star prospect by most national sites. I think he's clearly deserving of that with the offers that he has, with his film. Truly a really special athlete there at Connolly, and a guy that I just think is getting better and better, which is something that you really like to see out of a prospect. Now, for him, the most interesting part about this is he's obviously had a great relationship with the Baylor staff. He visited multiple times, came to Baylor games, but he kind of had to deal with a very sudden change. Because Kevin Curtis obviously moved on, and now Paul Gonzalez comes in from TCU. But the good thing about this is actually Paul Gonzalez had a great relationship with Jamarian already from his time at TCU. They had already gotten to know each other pretty well. So when that transition happened, it was very seamless for the two of them. And so really for Jamarian, I mean, he goes on his junior day visit, and he told me they didn't even really talk about, football or what, Paul Gonzalez has planned for him really at Baylor. That's going to come at a later visit. This was all about the relationship that they'd already established, the relationship that he had with the rest of the Baylor staff, the trust that he had in the staff, and the trust that, these guys are going to be able to get him where he wants to go ultimately. And obviously, I think there's just this building 254 connection that is growing and growing, and the importance and significance the Baylor staff has put on it is huge, but also when you see the results of landing a guy like Jamarian Vincent and London Smith in back-to-back days, it's really, really special. So, yeah, really good prospect. And I would also say, I think in this class, cornerback is definitely a big deal. So to get a cornerback of this quality locked in really early is very telling. And also, Paul Gonzalez, the last, 2 weeks, he's landed Calvin Simpson Hunt, a former top 50 prospect in the country, a really, really good transfer prospect, and then he also landed Jamarian Vincent. So I think that speaks very highly about kind of who he is as a person and also who he is as a recruiter.
Grayson, what do you think is next for Baylor on that front? And do you start seeing a 2026 recruiting class that right now I think they're ranked, I just read they're ranked like 38th this year. Do you see a top 25 class maybe in the offing?
If things continue to trend this way, which in order for that to happen, Baylor's going to have to win football games again, continue winning. That's been kind of the reoccurring theme that I've heard for over a year now. Just they got to get back to winning football games. And if they do that, there's this feeling that they can recruit at a very high level. And we're seeing that, right? The momentum from last year has really allowed them to secure that 2025 class. That I think is really, really good. I think that's a very special class, even though I know the rankings won't tell you it's a top 25 class. I do think it's right there on the fringe when you truly look through the quality in that class. And then, looking at this class, I think they're off to an even better start. And when you're working with 8 wins for an off season instead of working with 3 wins, it obviously gives you an advantage there and allows you to land guys like London Smith and Jamarian Vincent early. Because you don't kind of have to pitch, just wait till the season starts. We're going to show you kind of who we are. You're already able to do that, right? Because these guys know kind of what the expectation is going into this year. They know the system that's built. They know the head coach is in a good place now. There's just a lot of these factors that I think have led to them being able to recruit at this high of a level for 2026. I do think they can be a top 25 class, but to be honest with you, the thing of it is you can't really ever tell what national rankers are going to do. So would it surprise me if we turn around in 6 months and London Smith is, barely a 4-star guy and Jamarian Vincent drops below 4-star level because they committed to Baylor. No, that wouldn't surprise me. Now, would that be wrong? Of course it is. But if those kind of unlucky situations happen, or if guys don't get bumps that they deserve, such as, Quinn Murphy being ranked outside the top 100 players in the state of Texas, despite having 25 offers, then that can lead to them maybe not being ranked as highly as they should be. But I think in general, the quality of it, I very much think it'll be a top 25 class and potentially even higher than that if the rankings go the right way.
So what's on the horizon for football? I mean, you mentioned junior days, all that. What's kind of next up on the schedule? It kind of sucks, right? Because you sort of want to just dwell on these guys for a little bit, but it's just the nature of the beast. It's like, all right, what's next, right? So, unfortunately, what's next?
Right. So right now, I mean, you're having the workouts, the football workouts and things along those lines right now. During the spring, you'll have spring camp that comes up typically at the end of March and lasts for a month. So that's obviously something to keep an eye on. Usually the spring game is sometime at the end of April. So that's kind of the thing that's going on right now through the spring. Recruiting gets a little quiet during the month of February because you have a dead period. Right. But you'll start seeing guys on campus specifically during spring practices because typically guys like to come, visit the program, see how practices run, things like that. So you'll see more of those visits kind of pop up from a recruiting standpoint. But outside of that, yeah, that's kind of where they're at. They're going to have all these, the workouts. They're going to have, all these early enrollees are in now. The transfers are all in now. And now it's just kind of about preparing for this spring and then for next year. And also, of course, recruiting in the summer becomes more about the official visits. But right now it's still about the unofficial visits, trying to get guys a look at the program, kind of allow them to see what the program is about, see what the practices are about. And then hopefully, they're able to land some of these guys on official visits and secure those. Because as we've seen in past years, Baylor does a really good job once they get guys on campus. They really do a good job of closing. So if they're able to get some of those highly rated guys on campus, they might have a good shot at, really building a very special class for 2026.
Grayson, what's your level of faith in the basketball Bears as number 11 Kansas rolls in tomorrow afternoon?
It's a tough situation to be in. I mean, they played pretty well against Utah for the most part, and then turned right around and lost the game to BYU, in which I didn't feel like they played very well outside of Rob Wright and BJ Edgecombe. I just think they're in a spot where they're just inconsistent, and even on both sides of the ball, Kim Palm will tell you they're a good offensive team, but they go through droughts where it feels really hard for them to score. And then you also see situations where Norchad Omier, if he gets in foul trouble, they have real problems on this team. And the problem is he's been in foul trouble quite a bit, and now they're going up against Hunter Dickinson in Kansas, in which that's going to be a very tough test for them down low. Now, on the flip side, they have been pretty good at home outside of that TCU game. So if they're able to kind of regroup, shoot the ball well, maybe they can push Kansas a little bit. A Kansas team that has shown some cracks, not as many cracks as Baylor, but they've definitely shown some cracks and really got pushed to the limit against UCF the other night. So I think Baylor could potentially, come out with a win. But I will say right now, all of their issues that will probably cost them in the NCAA tournament are showing right now. And obviously the other part about it is they still can't get healthy. So if they can get there, maybe we'll get to see this full Baylor Bears team at some point. But right now they're ways away from that.
Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com. Grayson, sorry I forgot to text you earlier today, but I'm glad that you hopped on. Thanks for the info, and we will not talk to you next week because we'll be in New Orleans.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
All right. Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com.